Hi, let's look at using a cash flow projection for assessing the impact of a crop failure and then considering some shifts in your markets that might be needed. Say you've experienced an extreme weather event like a heavy rain that's washed out part of your field, and you have to quickly figure out a way to cover that loss. Maybe consider replanting or buying something in or making some changes to your market channels. How can you figure out a way to absorb the loss in income and keep your farm finances on track for the year? Well, a cash flow projection can help a lot. And here's an example of a cash flow projection from Entropy Farm, a diversified farm that produces vegetables and eggs and sells their products through many different market channels, both retail and wholesale. Now, I built this spreadsheet from a template that MOFGA has developed and we use in our farm beginning courses. It's linked below. So, looking at Entropy Farm cash flow projection for the year and just the totals in column N, we see they are planning on $107,000 in revenues, which includes buying in some milk from a local dairy for resale. And after accounting for the cost of goods sold for that milk, their gross profit will be $105,000. And scrolling down through all their expenses, I wanted to note that they pay themselves as employees $43,000. And then all the way down, their total expense budget is $85,000. And that leaves them with about $20,000 as net profit or cash flow from operations. And that's from their core farm operation. Below the green line in their other activities, we see they're receiving a grant, they have a tractor loan payment, and then they're also planning on an additional $10,000 as owner's draw at the end of the year, all of which results in a net cash flow of $205 and an ending cash balance of $8,200. It's pretty much a flat budget. You see, they started the year in January with about $8,000 in the bank, and they hope to end the year with about the same. But now let's say around the end of May, an intense storm rolls through, drops 2 inches of rain within 12 hours, and that washes out and floods the lower half of their fields where their lettuce crop was planted and beds were prepped for succession planting. So by early June, they estimate that 75% of their year's lettuce has been washed out. Plants were lost and they're unable to put in later succession plantings, potentially a huge financial loss. So, the cash flow projection is a good tool for assessing this damage, understanding the impacts, and imagining some paths to recovery, even within this same growing season. It's going to help us in estimating the loss of income, especially up at the top of the spreadsheet. But for this, we'll need more detailed sales projections for the year, both by crop, in this case the lettuce, as well as by market channel, so that we can estimate the dollars that will be lost from the crop across their various market channels. And so to start, let's first note that Entropy Farm's chart of accounts over in column A is set up by market channels, which means this cash flow projection will be useful in planning some various marketing shifts. But we'll also need separate sales data by crop, which could be a separate spreadsheet or a sales report from Square, whichever the way the farm tracks the records of annual vegetable sales. If this chart of accounts was set up by enterprise, say like vegetables, eggs, milk for resale, then we would want to create a separate report for their sales by market channel, like use Excel, or if they had QuickBooks, utilize the classes report. What we're looking for is to get a sense of how big or small the problem is. By identifying how big or small the lost crop is in terms of the farm's overall income stream, as well as which markets are the strongest and which ones are the weakest in regards to the lettuce. Let's quickly jump to Entropy Farm's sales projection spreadsheet to see, as an example, how this sort of information can help adjust the cash flow projections. So
they have this Google Sheet for sales data. And we see clearly first that lettuce is a significant part of their total sales. In the red column, you see 12% of total sales, bested only by arugula, 13%, and salad mix, 23.5%. This is a greens centric farm operation. Seems like salad greens is part of their identity, their brand. And now I like this sales projection sheet as it looks at each of the crops by market channel as well. So note that one retail market, Entropy Farm's own farm stand, and one wholesale market, this farm store at a place called Stomach Acres, make up the majority of their lettuce sales. And then scrolling down to the bottom, we see in the red row, where percentage of total sales by market channel is shown, that their own farm stand and Chuckleburg Farmers Market and the farm store at Stomach Acres are their largest market channels. So, armed with insights of this sort on sales, market information, we'll take a surgical approach, line by line, to the cash flow projection, looking for where we can change our plans and our budget in the face of the crop loss. And really, with crop failure, I see three separate strategies to employ when going into your cash flow projection to make adjustments. And these are looking at one, production shifts. Can you grow more quick growing substitute crops or buy in more crops from other farms for resale? Two, marketing shifts. Can you shift crops from one market channel to another or cut out some markets altogether for the year? And three, business financial shifts. Like, can you defer or cut some expenses? Now I'm going to jump to an already modified and adjusted cash flow projection to do all of this. And for the sake of this video, I made a copy of this original cash flow projection and then played around in that copy to try out different strategies and make all of the changes until I liked what the picture looked like. Here's the adjusted cash flow projection, and all the changes are in red. And so let's start by looking at the loss in income. I reduced the sales in the market channels by 75% estimated loss for the lettuce. And then, starting with our first strategy of production shifts, I guesstimated how they could increase their plantings of fast growing salad greens like arugula to make up for some of the lettuce loss, but also for many of the markets, I added in additional new sales, primarily where they can buy in some lettuce from other farms to replace their lost crop. And for that, I needed to add in the cost of purchasing those crops for resale in the cost of goods sold section. And then with the second strategy, looking for marketing shifts, I thought about what it would look like to drop out of the weakest market channel, the farmers market in Giggleton. So I took out all of the sales from there, reassigning those sales to the Entropy farm stand. Basically, they can plan on selling what lettuce there is in their strongest market channel and recognize some savings by dropping out of their weakest market channel. Finally, for considering the third strategy, business financial shifts, I looked both at deferring and cutting costs in the expenses section. So, where I felt an expense could be postponed or put off, I shifted those expenses in the cash flow, pushing some fertilizer and some tool purchases from May and June, as originally planned, to later in the year. And then for cutting costs, I looked at what not going to Giggleton Farmers Market would mean and estimated savings in gas, in labor, and in the market fees. And I also cut card processing fees through Square. Since they're going to experience a loss in sales, we can assume they'll have reduced processing fees based upon lower volume of sales. I also made cuts in the advertising budget and the office supply purchases. And then finally, down towards the bottom, in the owner's draw, I've decided that their original owner's draw of $10,000 could be trimmed down to $8,000. I took out $2,000 and made the cash flow projection work. And finally, over in column O, I made notes. I recorded the details of the changes I made, which helps in the planning and budgeting and review of all these risk assessment strategies. Now, all of this playing around in the spreadsheet landscape took some time and trial and error, but I arrived with a new picture that made it seem like the farm can make it through this major crop loss. So let's look at it. In this adjusted cash flow projection, with the 75% loss in the lettuce crop, we see going down the total column, the impact will result in a $9,000 loss in total revenues. Used to be 107,000, now it's down to 98,000. And going down to the gross profit, it's now about $11,000 lower. Used to be 104, now it's about 93,000. And finally, down at the bottom of our sheet, we'll see that the net cash flow is now negative, about $5,000, instead of being flat at around $200. But that seems okay to me, especially seeing that this lettuce washout was going to bring a $9,000 loss in farm income. And then see the ending cash in the bank is now $5,000 instead of $8,200. But again, we had to change the plan, and now we can see ways to do it which keep the ending cash positive through every month of the year. Well, my point is not whether you agree with these numbers and decisions, but that you see the spreadsheet as a trial ground. It's a place to cultivate and move numbers around, to test your ideas, different ideas and decisions. They can be played out here in an imaginary world so that the real life scenarios can be understood and decisions made with informed confidence. My hope is that you can get comfortable with utilizing farm financial statements as tools for agency in making decisions, and that they can help guide you through these challenges and find a path that sustains you in your farm operation. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is one in a series of farm financial topics that cover cash flow projections, as well as the chart of accounts and unit cost analysis spreadsheets. I hope you'll look those up. Check those links below for more information.